Your column appears in the Center Square every Monday. Today, of course, we're taping on a Tuesday because of the Labor Day weekend. And I think we've got interesting data coming out on the jobs report that, per your column, is going to really it's going to really take over all the headlines this week.
Oh, absolutely. Because we had the big revisions last month that showed job growth only averaged about 35,000 new jobs per month in the last 3 months. And compared to about 160 to 170,000 additions per month last year, right? So big downshift in job gains. And yet the unemployment rate remains low at 4.2%, right? You're not seeing the big increase in layoffs. You're not seeing the big increase in the unemployment rate. You look at then, initial claims, which are basically very predictive of where the unemployment rate's going. And initial claims are like, you look at continuing claims stopped rising. And then initial claims, actually fell in the last you look at the 4-week moving average, it's down. So, what does that mean? It means I don't see the unemployment rate increasing much. I think job gains could remain low. Part of the reason is labor supply has been, you have fewer people altogether. Not only, fewer people altogether, but fewer people entering the labor force, right? And we've even had a decline in the size of the civilian labor force. I've been to about 400,000 people, fewer people either working or looking for work in the United States. So if you have fewer people looking for work, right, the unemployment rate's going to be low. There's a supply constraint there. So, I don't see the unemployment rate moving up. In this Friday's jobs report, I see job gains remaining somewhat low, because of course of the supply constraint. And so this jobs report I should not really change anything in terms of the Fed decision, coming up, in a week or so, or 2 weeks, maybe, I think, the decision. So I just don't see this jobs report mattering very much.
Do you have an early read? I mean, I want to talk about the implications for borrowing, right? I mean, for consumers and for businesses. And I want to end with like you calling a shot, whether or not we're going to see a reduction in the Fed borrowing rate. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about it. What does it mean for businesses?
Totally. What does it mean, in terms of borrowing costs? Well, I pay attention to the 10-year treasury yield, and the 10-year treasury yield has actually been rising. It's lower than it was a year ago, but it's been rising. It's been on the rise across, in the U.S., but across the globe as well. I think the inflation pressure, is still very much, at play here. Not from tariffs necessarily. I think a lot of people think, tariffs. No, I think tariffs are one and done. They come, they filter through, you get a big price hike. It hurts economic growth, right? But ultimately it doesn't affect the pace you don't see prolonged price increases. So you don't see an increase in inflation. Right? It's going to come up one time and it's going to ease. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the labor supply problem. I'm worried about basically, if you have a bunch of people retiring, right? These people they're going to continue to consume, right? Right? They save as people get older and older and older. They're just consuming their savings, right? They save, right? So you got consumption there. You got, where are the workers going to come from in order to build the goods and services, to produce the goods and services that these people here are going to consume? I think that's the big question that people should be asking themselves, right? So we got a bunch of policies on the immigration front, and I'm not going to get into that. We got a bunch of stuff. We got a bunch of fiscal spending, right? A lot of it's going to be healthcare to take care of the old, right? A lot of our fiscal deficits are the highest they've been, in periods of peace, right? In peace periods, right? We're not in a war or anything, and we got massive fiscal deficits. That's inflationary. If you don't have workers, right? So I put up a thing on my LinkedIn profile, over the weekend where I was just showing that if you look at employment growth, over the past few years, right? Economic growth has really downshifted. Before COVID, employment was growing at a 1.7% per year. After COVID, it's down to about 1.07, 1.1% per year.
When you say before COVID, do you mean like before the lockdown started and before the forced unemployment was this
retirement, excess retirement went up. Lots of people were like, well, you know what? I might as well end now, right? That's it. I mean, I'm not going back to work.
You were fair. A lot of people were prompted to retire. They were kind of on the gateway anyway. And that was like, okay, I don't need to go back.
That's right. So we got a bunch of excess retirements at that time. Lots of people left the labor force for good. And then since then we had a recovery, but the recovery the numbers never came back to that trend, that pre-COVID trend.
Right.
And so we're still about, if we were still without COVID, we should still be roughly, adding about, 1.7%, per year. Right. And we're not. Right. And so we're on a lower trend. Right. And the economy is potentially running at this new lower potential. And, what does that mean? It means that, for interest rates, it means that basically, you have less capacity to build goods and services altogether. And so you need to adjust, right? Fiscal policy needs to adjust, downward. And if it doesn't, it's going to push inflation higher, right? Nominal GDP is going to exceed a real GDP, and that's going to cause, right? The gap between the two is going to be inflation. And that's the problem going forward with fiscal deficits, at the pace they're at. We may continue to have an inflation problem. In fact, inflation is still running above the Fed's target. And I think it's going to be very difficult to bring it down to the Fed's target without keeping interest rates, without the Fed keeping the policy rate where it's at. Right. And so when you start to think about the fact that the Fed is easing policy in this environment, I worry that we're not going to get the 5 or 6 rate cuts that the markets are currently anticipating.
Right.
If we don't get the 5 or 6 rate cuts that the markets are anticipating, yields, right? The 10-year treasury yield in particular is the one I worry about a lot, since I'm in the mortgage space of real estate, is going to go up, right? It's not going to keep going down, right? 10-year yields are going to go up. And so we saw it last year. The Fed cut 50 basis points. Yields went up. We're up 100 basis points by January, right? Just a few months after the first rate cut. I think we could potentially get a repeat of last year, where basically the Fed cuts, and then it has to pause again, right? It has to pause again because the economic data, we're not going to need 167, we're not going to get 180,000 jobs per month. Right? I don't think that's possible given the shrinking size of our labor force and the fact that our population is aging. And so over the long run, in the near term, we cut a few times, maybe once or twice, but that once or twice might be this, might be that. That'd be all we get from the Fed. I don't think we're going to get 5 or 6 rate cuts to normalize the policy rate. Like markets currently anticipate.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts as always. For Dr. Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics. Make sure you listen to Orphe and me each week on the Center Square Radio Hour.